Hello South Africa and welcome back to Coronacast, your twice weekly information show keeping you up to date with the issues that matter most to South Africans during this period. Well, we're on the 30th edition of Coronacast, so all of you who started watching with us right in the beginning, thank you. Keep watching, keep hitting the subscribe, keep sharing the videos as much as possible. There's some great information here on these videos, and the more you share them, the more informed people are about the issues that matter most to them. Well, we're day 92 of the extended lockdown, and we're on level 3, day 26 of government's risk-adjusted approach. Today, this week, is a special week for the Democratic Alliance. The Democratic Alliance's 20th birthday, 20 years ago, can you believe it? This party was formed out of the Democratic Party, the NNP, and the Federal Alliance that have come together to unite and form a strong bulwark of opposition and a pole that is an alternative in South Africa to the ANC. It has been a long journey for the DA, right back to the predecessors and the Progressive Party that fought on the front lines for freedom in South Africa. They were at the forefront of exposing the injustice that was the apartheid edifice. And I'm happy to say that the worst day in democratic New South Africa is better than the best day in the old undemocratic South Africa. We're all proud of our country. The Democratic Alliance is a party that's proudly rooted in South Africa. We want what's best for the country, and we won't stop fighting for justice, for freedom, and for the rights of ordinary South Africans to be able to live the life of value that they also richly deserve in a constitutional democracy with a government that respects the rule of law, that upholds the rights of citizens and respects the rights of citizens to express themselves in the way they want to conduct economic activity in the way they want to, and to ensure that we continue to protect and defend democracy. We've stood on the front lines of some very important battles over the last 20 years in post-democratic South Africa, from Sarafina, the Virodine scandal, right through to Nkandla, to helping to get rid of some nasty characters like Menzi Simelane, Sean Abrahams, our good friend Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng at the SABC. But also being able to stand up for South Africans, exposing Bell Pottinger and getting Bell Pottinger their blot off our landscape, completely cancelled by the British authorities, and they are no more. And these are just some of the small victories that we've had. But we've also had some great victories for ordinary South Africans. And I think here about the great case that Annette Steyn and the Democratic Alliance took up for Mr. David Richatse, who for years and years and years was fighting a battle with government just to get the land that he farms on, and that was promised to him by government, given it to him. It was the DA's determination and action and working alongside him in his court journey that saw finally justice given to people like David Richatse. And we're going to continue to stand up for ordinary South Africans like you at home on those front lines every single day, and ensuring that we have and we are able to build a better future for South Africa. Now, today's episode of Coronacast is tackling a very important topic and a very serious one indeed, and that is the scourge of farm murders. Now, South Africa is one of the most violent countries in the world. We have a variety of violent activity taking place, from the scourge of gender-based violence, which we dealt with in the last episode of Coronacast, to violence against children in the country. But we also have a huge problem with violence in our rural communities. What COVID has shown us, perhaps more than any time before, is just how important food security is to a country. The situation we find ourselves after many, many weeks of lockdown, hard lockdown, 51% of our households now are food insecure. And if we're going to ensure we have food security in South Africa, then we need to protect the bread baskets of South Africa, and these are in our rural communities. And sadly, we've seen during the course of the COVID virus and the lockdown an uptick in violent farm attacks in our rural communities. And that's what we're going to be discussing today, because the Democratic Alliance released a really good plan this week and we're going to be unpacking that. And I'm going to be joined in studio by the DA's Minister for Agriculture in the Western Cape, Minister Ivan Meyer, who also wears the other hat of being the federal chairperson of the Democratic Alliance. We're joined on our online platform by Dianne Kohler Barnard, who's the DA's Shadow Minister of State Security, but who heads up the Shadow Cabinet Workstream on rural safety, bringing together DA expertise from around the country around the thorny issue of rural safety. And then we're going to be speaking to Alison Oates, who is a farmer in the Free State, who herself was a victim of a farm attack. She's also a DA councillor, and she's going to be talking a little bit about rural safety from an on-the-ground perspective. I'm sure it's going to be an action-packed episode, and certainly one that a lot of you have been writing in about. And every time that we have a topic, whether it is gender-based violence, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's the economy, we get a stream of queries. What about farm murders? What can we do to solve farm murders? We hope to be able to answer some of those questions on Coronacast today. Well, Ivan, it's great to have you in the studio, and it's not your first time on Coronacast, and great to have you back on. Ivan came in with a great mask that he's had made 3D printed in his department. So talking about not only the love of agriculture, Ivan, but the love of innovation as well.
Well, John, that's exactly what we try to do here in the Western Cape. We have embraced one of the values of our government is innovation. So that was just a simple classical example of what can be done if we embrace innovation.
Yeah, great. Well, we're going to come back to you a little bit later, Ivan, and we're going to cross to Dianne first of all. Dianne, my colleague from my hometown of Durban. You and I have known each other for many, many years, and we've been in the trenches together, and it's really great to have you on Coronacast today. Welcome to the show. Great. Dianne, I'm going to get straight into it. This week we released a paper on the work stream that the Democratic Alliance's Rural Safety Workstream has been working very, very hard on over the last little while, and it's brought together some of the work that we began last year. Obviously, with the lockdown, it's been difficult, but we've now been able to convene via Zoom and come up with a proposal. Yesterday, I wrote to the Speaker, and I've called for a debate of national public importance in Parliament on rural safety, and we're hoping to hear back from the Speaker on that. But you want to take us through some of the work the Rural Safety Workstream has been working on and why it is so important.
Certainly, I'd like to just point out that the Democratic Alliance has been raising issues about rural safety for many years. This is not something out the blue. Certainly, I was speaking out about it as far back as 2006, and prior to that was Dr. Roy Jankelson, who's now gone to his province, and he is doing exactly the same in the Free State, speaking out, and we always have done. However, as you said, during the lockdown, the attacks on farms escalated dramatically, and unfortunately, the violence that seems to accompany attacks in rural areas, and this is farms, small holdings, visitors to farms, workers on farms, no one is exempt from these attacks. They have just gone through the roof. And if you think about it, we had 128,000 commercial farmers at the start of democracy, and we're now down to, I heard a figure yesterday, of 38,000. So food security is what it's all about, as well, of course, is the safety of our citizens. There have been nearly 5,500 attacks since 1990, and well over 2,000 murders, and literally, as I was speaking at our press conference yesterday, another person was murdered, literally as we were having the press conference. It's horrendous what's happening. It's almost inexplicable. So we've come up with, and we had a very large working group and work stream, and we've come up with a number of proposals. I think first and foremost that farm murders should be categorized as hate crimes. That's being worked on by Advocate Glynis Breitenbach. our Shadow Minister of Justice, it's not only the attacks, but the reporting and charging those who delight in these attacks on social media and ask for more murders of farmers and their families and their children. That has been left and has not happened previously. I think the time has come that it must be people, South Africans must be now held to account for speaking in those ways on social media and elsewhere. And something that your next guest is now very familiar with, Alison, is we're also going to be holding a watching brief on these farm attacks. Glynis Breitenbach, for example, is doing a watching brief right now, as of today, on Alison's case. You will hear more about her case and how long she's been waiting for justice shortly. But that is not how it should be, and any councillor who has an attack in their ward will do the acting brief and be in touch weekly with the investigating officer, make sure that the alleged perpetrators don't arrive in court without the family being told and then have the case dismissed. That is frequently the case. We also, because of the inexplicable situation, we're looking at more research into this matter. Why is it being done? Is it hatred? Is it greed? Is it mainly foreigners coming in from countries where they're starving, looking for something to sell, something to use, but again, that doesn't explain the violence. And frequently we are told by various agricultural unions in the attacks, nothing is taken. The family is brutalized and they simply leave. So that has to be explained to us. And of course, in amongst that is a greater interaction with the numerous agricultural unions. There seem to be 5 top ones, but there are many offshoots. So those kind of relationships must be engendered, built upon, and make sure that we work very carefully and closely with them. And certainly our colleague, the Shadow Minister of Agriculture, Annette Steyn, is very well known. You spoke about her earlier, and her drive to get title deeds for people who own land and just are never given the title deeds. And her successes in that area, it's wonderful to see. And it was pointed out by one of the top agriculture heads to us last week that the potential of agriculture as to the economy is being vastly underestimated. It really is a means to kill poverty, and owning one's own land, being able to grow one's own produce is a way to tackle what is going to be, after the coronavirus, a massive unemployment situation. And then you come to the police, often a very sticky relationship. Sometimes the police don't want to work with, for example, private security firms. The private security firms supply the helicopters that chase people who have committed farm attacks. Other provinces, they work very well together. So there are areas that need a lot of attention, and certainly they have got to reintroduce specialized units. You know, Jackie Celebe scrapping all the specialized units, what he did was a travesty. And we find that the needs of today are just not being met. And these rural stations are often Cinderella stations. They have very few members, they don't have any equipment, they don't have the correct vehicles, it's horrendous. So those units that are able to apprehend, track down perpetrators have got to be built up, including the investigative capacity of SAPS, and then to categorize these crimes as priority crimes. There's no difference in these crimes to the already categorized house robbery, business robbery, car hijacking. They're priority crimes. They're treated as such. Why aren't these treated as such? That's the question that SAPS are going to have to answer. Like these trio crimes, they need the same kind of dedicated solution. So SAPS must pull up their socks in that regard. The party is, of course, also fighting Section 25 of the Constitution. We have, I think, 3 of our members on that committee who are very dedicated to saying you will not simply take people's property, land, whatever. I mean, nothing's detailed in there. It could be anything from your grandmother's jewelry to your shares to your house. So we are fighting that tooth and nail. Some of the difficulties experienced by farmers are, for example, the eviction regulations. We heard a story of a gentleman who was harassing female workers to such an extent that 16 of them left. And it took 2 years to go through the legal processes to have him evicted from the farm. That can't be possible in this day and age. Tax relief is a big one. That should be to anyone who has to pay for private security. Often it's whole communities who pay for a single company. They all work together, but there are reams of volunteers. There was a very complex rural system set up, and Bheki Cele stepped in and shut it down. Oh no, if they drive around in their cars, they will be spreading the coronavirus. Absolute rot. He shut down a workable system, and as a result, farmers have woken up, their entire crops are gone. Thieves have come in the night and picked entire avocado crops. They've picked other crops. They've cut down massive trees. I've got reports from all over the country. That's what Bheki Cele has achieved. While the police were tasked with arresting people who put a toe on the sand of a beach, people were being attacked and robbed blind of billions of rands of equipment in our rural areas. So, yes, not a fan of Bheki Cele. At last few are increasing the crime intelligence capacity. You all know that Richard and Bluli destroyed our crime intelligence. They've had to start from virtually nowhere. General Jacobs is a fine man, and he's doing the best he can. But of course, it has to start baby steps, and he's working his way through our cities. But the rural areas need far more attention. And then comes our border. I have stood and filmed people crossing through from Swaziland into South Africa, and the Defence Force men stood next to me. And I said, why don't you stop? What's happening here? He said, no, they go back and forth all day. And on the day that the grants are given out, it's double the number, but we've been told not to stop them. So why do we bother to say we have borders? Of course, Patricia de Lille has her washing line, but that was broken through in about an hour on the Zimbabwe side. So that's irrelevant. So they have to take it seriously and get fingerprints of anyone coming into this country so that when there's an attack, we have the fingerprints on record. Finally, from our side, we're going to call for a joint ministerial summit on rural safety in Parliament, and that would include police, army, security, agricultural, land portfolios, all coming together to look for solutions, looking at the myriad rural security threats and find those solutions that I know we can find, because we've done these sorts of summits before on firearms and other areas. We can find the solutions, and we're determined to do so. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dianne. And of course, all of this plan is very comprehensively set out on the DA website, www.da.org.za. Those of you at home and wanting to look at the actual full document can go there and access it there. Dianne, a lot of people take for granted farmers, and they don't really understand how important they are to the survival of South Africa. Why do you think they're so important to us, and why should we be protecting them at all costs?
Well, our farmers, each farm feeds about 1,500 of us. And as you know, when we had the lockdown, every market they had simply collapsed. And we saw farmers gathering up the crops that they had produced over November, December last year and handing them out to starving South Africans, free, gratis, for nothing, all over the country. This is what they did. It's the farmers who step forward. They give water off their farms when there's a drought. They give and they give and they give. And I so seldom see anyone say thank you, except perhaps for Ivan, sitting right there next to you. They are the people who feed us. To just say, oh, well, we'll buy in from elsewhere is a nonsense. It's like saying we'll print our own money. Oh, that was said yesterday, I think. We rely on, we are fed by, we are nurtured by our farmers. and we have to take care of them, and they should have the same rights as any other South African who lives anywhere else in the country. We can't have someone lean in a window and shoot 2 children in their beds, as happened last week. And it just goes on and on, these atrocities in the rural areas, because they're so far away from any police station. People are pretty much on their own and have to do their own security. It is terrifying for them. Our farmers are leaving. Sometimes the families just can't stand to be there once there's been an attack. And these are attacks on their farm managers, on their staff, on themselves, and even visitors to their farms have been attacked, and attacked horribly, terribly. So these are people we should be cherishing as a nation, instead of reading on these terrible social media sites this gloating, why didn't you kill another 10? It's just terrible what's going on, and we have to change the national mindset and start treasuring our farmers, because otherwise we'll be starving.
Yeah. Well, I think there's that famous saying, and I've shared it with Ivan before, you maybe need a lawyer once a year, you probably need a doctor 2 or 3 times a year, your pharmacist every couple of months, but you need a farmer 3 times a day. Every time that you are putting food on your plate, that is originated in a rural area. And I think the important point you make there, Dianne, is that it's broader than the farmers. The farmers themselves. There's the farm workers. There's the rural communities that exist and depend on the economic activity around these farms. And when farms fail, there's obviously economic impacts on so many of those rural towns. And I must say that's one of the things that really struck me traveling around on my Real State of the Nation tour ahead of the State of the Nation earlier this year, was just the decline in those rural communities and the sort of economic failure that you're starting to see there. And when those farms shut down or the farmers move off, and that economic activity comes to an end, it has a knock-on effect on children, wives, those broader communities. And the thing that I don't understand is, if this is a policing problem, why does a Minister of Police not get to grips with it? Why do we see this lag? Why is it not being prioritised?
It's been ignored by the ANC since day one. No, not quite. We had a system that existed running through into democracy, where the Defence Force used mainly reservists as a team called the Commandos, and they were tasked with keeping the rural areas safe. And they were very good at arresting anyone. The attacks were low. And then Thabo Mbeki took it upon himself to simply announce, standing on the podium one year when he gave a State of the Nation address, I'm shutting them down. They swore then to replace this unit, but they never did. And, I see the president so often, if there's a tragedy in an area, he will go and offer his sympathies to the family and pay his respects. I've never seen him do that, ever, for anyone in a rural community, whether it's someone running a farm, managing a farm, leasing a farm, or a small holding somewhere in a rural area. He just doesn't bother. And these are people of every color. In KwaZulu-Natal, I know an Indian family killed. It's just, there's no interest. And he acts as though people in our rural areas simply don't exist. It is unconscionable, and it's something he's done for a very long time. And I think he's going to be called out on it quite severely, because I think our entire rural community as a unit, and they work very closely together. All our rural communities are like families, and I think they've had enough of being ignored. When I see the hundreds of millions of rands coming in, relief, COVID relief, go and ask a farmer how much they saw, and they'll say nothing, not 1 rand. So it's very scary indeed.
Dianne, looking through the plan, one of the things that's relatively fresh in that is the idea of reporting farm attacks as hate crimes. And it's something that Glynis Breytenbach has felt very passionate about. Do you want to take us through some of the reasoning behind that and the thought on that?
Well, yes. When it's called for, I mean, if it's not just a straight robbery, if it goes a lot further than that, and you will find there are victims who are over and again, when they're abused, are saying you stole our land, or and I know Mr. Rukhatsi is also getting very nervous. He's being treated very strangely now that he owns his land. Other people are saying, why do you own land and I don't? So he's also under threat now. So if attacked in that manner, she's drawing up the way in which it can be reported. And certainly also all the calls on social media. I know, as I said, there have been some 8,000 logged. They're generating a swell of hatred in this country that we don't need, and we should not have, and we should not allow. And those people who make comments like that need to be in court, like anyone who makes some revolting comment is called to court. So you can't glorify murder and torture in this country. You cannot. And it shouldn't be allowed, and it has been allowed, and I think the time has come for it to be stopped in its tracks. So, you know, hate crimes are defined in two ways. The first is the act itself is considered a crime under existing South African criminal law, but the second is motivated in whole or part by a prejudice or a hatred regarding an aspect of the victim's identity. So hate crimes aren't simply committed against vulnerable groups. They're in fact crimes committed against individuals because of a particular prejudice that the perpetrator holds against a group of people. So it's a fairly complex system, but Glynis in her brilliance will formulate a plan for us, and we will make sure that anywhere in the country that this is experienced, anywhere on social media this is seen, those people will be held to book until we stamp this out.
Dianne, last year the DA released its plan to be able to put police personnel on the ground in rural areas to deal with the huge shortages, and proposed a similar system to the commando system, but this time using reservists. With this, and are there any other measures that that have been proposed that are going to be able to assist in combating the scourge of attacks in rural areas?
Well, I have to tell you that Becky Cele hates reservists. That goes way back. And when he was even the National Police Commissioner, before he was fired from that job, he shut them down. They were shut down for years. People would go in and offer their services at their local police station, and they'd say, we're not allowed to. And they've diminished their job, diminished their role. There was a very organized structure, and you would work your way up through the structure. That's all stopped. And now they've even taken firearms away from reservists. So they're expected, if they have a criminal situation, to wave a cell phone at the perpetrators. It's a bizarre situation, all brought about by Becky Cele. And yet they could be used and should be used, as should the Defence Force reservists, who should be used in the border areas. They should be used for patrols and to bring intelligence back to the police station for analysis. So that, I think, could be made to work if you just had the political will to make it work. So I think that is the main system. It's a whole pool of individuals who are keen to keep our country safe, and they'll do it for nothing. What more can a person ask for? So yes, I think that's the main one, but it's going to be very slow to get off of the ground. They now have opened up for reservists again, but of course they're very young and inexperienced and have to go and learn the ropes first.
Dianne, I mean, just it's talking about that as well. There's these rural communities are vulnerable. The police stations are very few and far between. There's not enough personnel. There's no vehicles there. One of the last lines of defence farmers have is self-defence. And yet we're seeing an assault on the ability to own firearms in the country for self-defence, even though we have one of the highest murder rates in the world, even though the police to population ratio is one of the worst in the world. Obviously this is a huge problem for rural communities, particularly what seems to be a move to disarm rural communities from being able to defend and protect themselves?
Look, we had a situation where when there was the whole court case about the licenses, Becky Cele, so not my dog, okay, it's Alison's crying.
Alison's dog, we'll get to Alison just now.
Yeah, is wanting to join in here. There was an attempt.
I think he's expressing what he thinks about Becky Cele, actually. I think he heard the name and it obviously unsettled him.
There was an attempt to basically disarm hundreds of thousands of people. It was just a ridiculous proposal, but the SAPs are very keen to do it because there is, we have this very bizarre organization called Gun Free South Africa. I've never worked out who's behind it. I know it has one member who somehow seems to lead this charge in front of the Police Portfolio Committee and goes and speaks regularly to the ANC caucus. But if you are on your own and 5 people break in, are you then supposed to phone Becky Cele and say, would you mind coming to help me out? People are on their own. And when you're in a rural area, you're on your own. And one of the ways to ameliorate the trust deficit between rural individuals and the SAPs is for the SAPs to actually assist them in obtaining their firearm licenses, make the process easier, and if needs be, assist them in training in every way they can. They are a service. They changed it from police force to police service. They're supposed to serve the people who pay their salaries. And so often I fear our SAPS members have become arrogant, and you've seen all the film footage of the treatment of solitary joggers or women on their own, or the treatment during this lockdown has been appalling, and they're going to have to work very hard to try and regain any trust by the citizens of South Africa in the SAPs. I mean, if you see a police officer, is your innate thought, well, let me go to that officer and ask for help? Usually South Africans will turn tail and run the other way. They are scared of the police. They don't want anything to do with the police. But these are the people that someone like Alison has to phone for help. Yeah.
Great.
They're
well,
on
thanks.
their own.
Thanks, Dianne. We'll obviously watch the debate in Parliament. Hopefully the Speaker's going to approve it, and obviously watch the number of these proposals being tabled through private members' bills, through amendments to legislation. But thank you very much for the work that you and the team are doing, and thanks for being on Coronacast today. Well, Alison's dog already went ahead and introduced her to the Coronacast. But, in order to have Alison and give her a proper introduction, seeing it's her first time on Coronacast as well, we've got an introduction video. Alison, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Nice to have you on the show, Alison. And we're going to have a little video that introduces you, and then we can meet you and the dog.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry about the dog.
One Sunday afternoon, I came home and 2 people accosted me. At first, I thought they were some friends playing a practical joke, but they weren't. They were after guns and money. I had neither. They didn't believe me, and for 3 hours, they were very vicious indeed to me. It is astoundingly difficult to get over this stuff, and no farmer is ever safe. We have burglar guards on our houses, we have panic buttons, we have radios. We have had poor support of the policing system and the judiciary in the last 20 years. I knew that this would be difficult, but I am prepared to do it because I want things to change. The idea that the DA doesn't support farmers is just ludicrous. The DA supports farmers and supports farming.
Well, Alison, thank you. That shows everyone a bit about who you are. Everyone's asking on the throne, what's the dog's name? I've got viewers wanting to know, what's the dog's name?
The dog's name is Pepsi Cola. She's a puppy. I've got 4 guard dogs, and I've tried to keep them all quiet, but Pepsi is not keen.
Well, that's fine. Sorry. I'm glad Pepsi's on the show. So welcome to you and welcome to Pepsi. And I mean, wow, what a formidable woman you are. A female farmer running a number of head of cattle in the Free State there in rural areas. Welcome to Coronacast. And why don't you give us a bit of a background about what life is like on the ground and what the community's lived experience is like there in a farming and rural community?
Well, first of all, being a farmer is a lovely job, a wonderful job, a privilege. And I can understand why people want to farm, because I do. But it is a fact that farming has become very dangerous nowadays. We are aware of our safety continuously. We're always worried about what could be lurking. Obviously, it doesn't prevent us from living our lives, but it is a factor that we have to bear in mind. We have a lot of security in our houses. We have security in our bakkies. We have cameras. But I mean, security is an issue for us farmers.
So it's always in the back of your mind then, Alison. I mean, you come home, when you come home, when you leave, when you're out in the fields, when you're tending to your herd, it's always something that's gnawing there at the back. Am I safe? Am I going to be attacked? Is my home being burgled? What's next?
That is true. That is true.
Right. So, Alison, in your area, stock theft particularly is a big issue. Well, you want to tell us a little bit how stock theft affects you and how it's happening? Because it seems to be very sophisticated these days. It's a lot more than just somebody coming and stealing a cow and taking it off. It's a lot more organised and coordinated, and obviously it has a big impact on your community.
It is a great problem, and it affects both the commercial farmers and the rural and the emerging farmers as well. We have regular feedback sessions with the local farmers, and believe me, the emerging farmers are as badly affected as we are. I have to say right now, as we speak, my workers are we are 27 cattle short, and they're busy trying to find them. Hopefully they're just lying down in the grass out of the wind somewhere. We are affected by people who will come and slaughter an animal in the night and then take the meat for sale to a local butchery in the next morning. We are affected by people who want cattle in Lesotho because we're quite close to Lesotho. And then there are people who come with big cattle moving lorries and load a host of animals for sale at a commercial sale yard somewhere else. Cattle are a problem, and sheep are absolutely suicidal. We call sheep Free State takeaways because more and more people are moving out of sheep. It's very difficult. I've stopped farming sheep a long time ago. So the stock theft is a serious problem. I want to give a case of some neighbours who had about 80,000 rands worth of cattle stolen. It took a long time to get the man convicted. He was a civil servant, so you cannot say that he was starving. He was sent to jail for 8 years in December, and he is now out on parole because of coronavirus. And he doesn't have a job anymore. And there's one thing he knows how to do. I'm not saying he's doing it, but it is a big worry for us.
Well, I think that is the big worry, about this parole system, because as we know, there's a 75%, I think, recidivism rate in South Africa. And so these, I think 15,000 odd prisoners who've been released, go into communities where there's lockdown. And there's a big temptation to go back to what you know. And that is, I'm sure, a big concern for all of you out in those rural areas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a worry. I think that we also really need to look at how our courts are functioning. I want to say to you that my farm attack happened nearly 5 years ago. The person who was accused and is linked through DNA is still wandering around the district. He was born here. His girlfriend lives on the farm next door to mine. And there is the perception that he is not bearing the consequences. Obviously, he is innocent until he's proven guilty. I believe that implicitly. But there is a great deal of evidence stacked against him, and he is not being brought to book. And that is a worry, because it encourages other people to think that they can also act with impunity.
Yeah. Well, lots of comments coming through here, how remarkably brave you are, Alison, but this must really burn inside you to be 5 years down the track with no sense of justice for what was taken from you can never be given back to you, traumatic experience, and yet the perpetrators are still walking around free. I think that it must burn inside you. And how does it make you feel as a victim?
Well, I don't call myself a victim. I call myself a veteran. So that is an important distinction for me. But what I want to say is that I am just one of many people who have been affected this way. So there is a logjam in our justice. And I'm just one person, and it is very difficult, and it is very difficult even with my family, because they keep saying to me, leave it. Why are you going through all of this? And I've got to say that I'm beginning to just get so upset by the whole thing that I hear it, but then I think, no, I won't. I know that's what they want, but I won't. And really, truly, the implementation of justice, it has to start at the top. I am fairly high on the pecking order. I can get airtime on programs like this, but there are a lot of people who are very low on the pecking order and who are suffering because they cannot get justice.
Yeah. How many times have you been in court, and has the case been adjourned, and what is the reason? Why is there this 5-year delay in what seems to be a relatively open and shut case? There's DNA evidence, there's circumstantial evidence, there's all the evidence that's there. Why are we sitting 5 years later, no closer to a conviction than we were after the attack?
Well, one day the poor man had a headache, so he couldn't concentrate. I'm not lying. He'd been arrested and been bashed up, and he had a headache. He was arrested for another assault, and he had a headache and he couldn't concentrate. Then he fired a lawyer. Then he appointed a lawyer of his own. And he's an unemployed labourer. He appointed a lawyer of his own, and then halfway through, he couldn't pay the lawyer, and then we had to go back to starting again. I haven't counted the times. In the beginning, it upset me greatly to go to court, and I would walk out howling, but so I don't know how many times, but a lot of times. And I'm very grateful that Dianne is going to try to help me. But what we really need to do is to change the system, not to help me, but to help all South Africans.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. That's what I wanted to ask you next, Alison. From your veteran status, as you've put it, what could be changed? What needs to be changed from so the moment that the attack happens to where we sit now, what is the type of change and support you'd like to see from government in this regard?
Well, look, the key to this thing is obviously to prevent it. And we, farmers are busy putting up cameras. We put up cameras and they're helping a great deal. Of course, you're just stopping a gap. As soon as you stop that gap, another one will be found and open. So you've just got to be nimble and moving around. And we've got a wonderful policeman in charge of rural safety here. He has night vision stuff and all kinds of things. So, sorry, and those are my guard dogs. We need to prevent these things. We need to empower farmers. This idea that we were not allowed to go on patrols during lockdown has got to be the most peculiar decision conceivable. How you can't drive around in your bakkie. I'm very sorry about this. Do you want
it's
to
fine.
Me out?
It adds to the rural charm. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I try to prevent my workers coming, but I hear they've driven up. Perhaps they've come to tell me they found the cows.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah, so we need to find ways of preventing this. Empower the police. We need the sentences to be justice, not to take 5 years. Generally speaking, around here, we say that it takes 2 years of a farmer's time to convict somebody for stock theft, and the perpetrators spend less than 2 years in jail. So that may be an exaggeration, but that's how we feel here. We need also this question of restitution needs to be thought of, because right now there's very little being involved in rural crime has very little negative effects. No, man, Pepsi. I'm terribly sorry.
No, it's no problem, Alison. I'm glad you're being well looked after, that's all. There's got to be consequences to people. They steal some cattle. If you're lucky, the cattle are recovered. It's quite likely they won't be recovered. So you as the farmer have got that loss, and then the person goes to jail for a very short period of time, and then the circle starts again. If that person could actually have their assets liquidated, even if it didn't replace the cost of what was stolen, it would make them feel something. Yeah. Well, Alison, I'm going to leave you to you and Pepsi to go and find those missing cattle, and we hope you do find them. But thank you for your bravery, and thank you for just your attitude. And as I said, we're going to help out with Glynis and Dianne with the watching brief, and we'll keep the Coronacast viewers updated in terms of the progress on your case. Stay strong and stay safe. And as I say, I hope you find those cattle.
Thank you. And I'm sorry about my dog. I really am.
It really is no problem. It was great having Pepsi on, and tell her thank you very much. Next time we'll get her on as her own guest.
Thank you.
Well, Ivan, we've heard from Alison and the type of experiences that she's had. What are we doing in the Western Cape, where you're the minister, to try and assist people like Alison to be able to combat this type of criminality? And why is agriculture so important?
Yes, firstly, thank you, John, for appearing on this show. But firstly, let me, as the chairman of the party, also thank and appreciate the work that Dianne and the team has done. Outstanding work, and I want to express my deep thanks and appreciation for the whole team in the agricultural, because this is really a very important matter. But looking here, what we're doing here in the Western Cape, we've just heard now, Dianne said, we need to have political will to deal with the issues of farm attacks and farm murders in South Africa. And that's exactly what we've done here in the Western Cape. We have decided to take this matter straight into the level of political accountability into the Western Cape Cabinet. So at the Cabinet level, we appointed an interministerial committee on rural safety to put democratic accountability with the MEC of Agriculture, that's me, and with the MEC for Community Safety, Albert Fritz. So together, that's our responsibility to make sure that we promote rural safety at a ministerial level. But at the secondary level, I've appointed also a technical committee on rural safety to assist us with deploying innovation and technological tools and techniques to make sure that we assist farmers. So that's at the political level. The second important issue, which was now discussed also by our colleagues here, is the whole issue of watching briefs. We've implemented watching briefs, and every time when a farmer or a farm worker is attacked, immediately there's a watching brief. Well, we were very successful last year with the one person that terrorized the farming community in Bonnieville in the Cape Winelands. We were very successful with the conviction. That person is now in jail for 52 years, double life sentence, will never see coming out here in the Western Cape. So that's the level of determination that we have for people that attack our farmers here, because my heart bleeds every time when I hear about a farm attack. And if I see what farmers are doing, it is extraordinary what farmers are doing. So we are protecting our farmers through watching briefs. The third issue is we have now also allocated more money to the various district municipalities, particularly for rural safety, employing cameras, digital technology to our farming units and our farming watching situation. So technology for us is very important, and we can speak about that later on. The fourth issue for us is really supporting farmers in the various areas. We have also now, personally, I go to court. When any farmer is attacked or murdered here in the Western Cape, you will see me as the Western Cape MEC in court. I will testify in court. I will be on the side of the farmer. I will oppose bail within the framework of the rule of law. I will submit affidavits there. So apart just from the emotional support, farmers need much more than just simply the emotional support. And so for us, it is important that we have a government that serves also, as Dianne Kohler Barnard said earlier, let us have not a force, but a servant culture. So my job is to serve the agricultural. And lastly, I've also coined, as you know, a hashtag for the love of agriculture. Now, I did that specifically, John, because I want to show that farmers need love. Farmers are giving love. And I think it is, for me, important that we, through this hashtag, portray a positive image of farmers. Because if you attack farmers, if you kill farmers or farm workers, you certainly don't love them. So through my hashtag, which is now a national, and I want it to become an international hashtag for the love of agriculture. Soon you're going to see that hashtag on vegetable trucks here in the Western Cape, because I think I want to change the psyche of the South African society, because we need to appreciate farmers more in South Africa.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you spoke about, it's very interesting, is technology. And what we're seeing is the criminals are deploying a lot more technology these days, signal jammers and night vision spectacles, etc. How are you harnessing technology in the Western Cape to combat the fight against rural criminals?
Yes, I think what we are seeing is that the transportation is a very important network for criminals, particularly in the rural areas. So we have done some digital mapping in terms of these particular routes. For us, we're also now encouraging innovation through our budget. So we have made money available through our budget here in the Western Cape to use innovative techniques and tools to assist our farmers. One of the things that we, for example, done, we are supporting the Rural Safety Watsons command centers, as they call them, the information and technological systems, which we do support them through the district municipalities. But one of our own technologies to assist farmers is the advanced number plate recognition system. So if a person drives in any rural area, immediately we pick it up through our traffic law enforcement agency. That is linked to the South African police through the rural safety, and then back to the farming watching units, so that we can immediately track. So what we have done in the farming communities is to give them digital access to our information network, so where we can track these people committing these particular crimes. And what I've also seen, I've visited some of these farming technological platforms, outstanding work, particularly in Bonnieville, as also here in the Hex River. Farmers are doing quite a lot of work, and my job is there to support them in particularly employing innovation to actually limit the negative impact on the rural areas here in the Western Cape.
Well, Ivan, I mean, I think that's great. And, one of the things that is in our document as well that we presented last year was on the use of drone technology, being able to, particularly rural areas, be able to patrol through video footage and the like, large tracts of rural areas. So technology, I think, is definitely going to be leveraged in the fight. But I wanted to get on to the next thing. I know that we saw the president announcing recently that they want to deploy national ministers into provincial governments here. But I think it should be the other way around. I think we should be sending Western Cape ministers to national government to go and give them some advice. If you were the National Minister of Agriculture, what would you be doing today to ensure the safety of farmers in our rural communities?
I think this is a very important issue. Firstly, I think we need to respect the dignity of farmers. That's in the Constitution. But more at a human level, I think I would firstly make any activities that criminal activities will declare as a priority unit. I will certainly also immediately employ specialized rural safety units, as we've heard from Dianne. That is certainly what I will do. I will also reallocate some of the budgets for particularly the rural safety units. We need to empower the various units here in South Africa, particularly in our rural economies, because what we have seen, John, if you attack a farmer in a rural area, or farmers are stopping their activities, you bring the whole rural economy down. And for us, this is not acceptable. And certainly, we need to have a little bit more respect and dignity towards our farmers. We have seen, as Dianne has now said, during the lockdown period, they were declared as essential workers. They are now feeding the nation. They need love, they need compassion, they have families, they need dignity. But what concerns me more, John, is not this only crime, it's the brutality of the crime. I went to one farm where people put boiling water on the woman, where legs were cut off. Some of these are brutal crimes, and the brutality of these crimes worries me, and this is why I welcome your call to have a debate of national importance in the National Assembly. This nation cannot live and survive without our farmers. Here in the Western Cape, the farmers during COVID-19, they are now distributing foods. They are now donating citrus fruit. The milk producing organization in South Africa have now asked all the milk farmers to make 1% donation of their daily production. That is massive. Yes, that is the heart of the farmer. And so I think it is the right time for the Democratic Alliance to pursue the safety of our farmers, but ultimately the safety of South Africa. Because this is bigger than just simply farmers, and farmers play an enormous big role in the economy in South Africa. And I believe an attack on a farmer is an attack on the economy of South Africa. Absolutely. It is economic sabotage, and that's why I welcome the debate in the National Assembly.
Well, I think it's important, and I think that it worries a lot of us. I mean, I know that Dianne and other people have always commented on the brutality of it. This is not somebody being held up and tied up in a chair. It's often accompanied by hours of brutal torture and maiming of individuals, really clearly designed to intimidate and send a message. And it's what I liked about Albert Fritz when we had him on the show talking about gender-based violence. He was talking about the whole of government approach, and it's very clear that this is the same there. So this is not something that's been, you're not the Minister of Agriculture saying, well, safety is the Minister of Safety's concern. This is a whole of government approach to combating this type of crime. And I think that is the key difference here as well. I want to talk a bit about food security. And, you've said farmers have always come through for us in our time of need. Here in the Western Cape, when there was the drought, it was the farmers that came to the rescue and helped to prevent day zero. You're seeing the good work that's being done with feeding the hungry in South Africa. These farm attacks, what effect do they have on food security in the country?
Well, again, John, I think an attack on the farmer and the rural community is an attack on the rural economy. I believe it is economic sabotage, and I think it has a massive negative impact on food security, not only in the Western Cape, but in South Africa, because farmers are very instrumental in the food value chain. And I think what we have seen here in the Western Cape, in 2018, we had a 43 billion rand agriculture value production. And for us, for me particularly, here in the Western Cape, I must protect the safety of our farmers, because I must protect the economic output of South Africa, because 45% of all the agricultural exports in South Africa comes from this province. So it is in the interest of South Africa that we protect the economy and the rural economy here of the Western Cape. And so for me it's important. It's about 226,000 jobs that I need to protect. It's 10% of our economy. It's 17% of South Africa's labor force. So for me, the safety of our farmers is important because it will have a negative impact. It will be an attack on the South African nation if people do not have access for food. And I want to, on this show, John, express my deep thanks and appreciation for all the farmers in South Africa, all the farmers who make during this difficult period, still while they are under attack, still give. That's the nature of a farmer. It's giving. And all they ask for us, show us a little bit of respect. And I think this show demonstrates the work that Dianne and the agriculture team has shown, is really to show and demonstrate that we are caring for farmers, and we will do everything possible to protect our farmers. And here in the Western Cape, I will be in court. I have been here in the Cape High Court many times. And if anybody attacks a farmer in the Western Cape, they must know we have a saying here, jou gat gaan nie weer son sien nie.
Well, there we go. There you have it. And what a great note to end that interview with. Well, Dianne and Ivan, thank you very much for being here today. And to Alison, it's been great having you guys on. And you've certainly added value to the debate. And I think it's an important debate for us to be having as a country. So thank you both for being here. Well, folks, it's certainly been an action-packed episode, and we end on a good note because Alison did send a message through to say the cattle have been found. So that's a good way to end on this Friday. And my shout-out this week goes to the DA team and the National Council of Provinces, and particularly George Mikalakis, a young Member of Parliament from the Free State, who we've been having a terrible problem with. Our Minister of Cogta, you may know her as Mrs. Corona Command Council, and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Now, one of the means in which MPs hold ministers accountable is through written questions, which ministers are then obliged to answer. Not so much for Mrs. Dlamini Zuma, who has been sending a formulaic response to every single question, saying the information is not available at this moment and will be provided as soon as it becomes. Clearly a dodge to having to be held accountable. Well, George was very enterprising, and so he submitted a question asking the minister a very simple question. What province is the capital city of the Republic of South Africa located? Needless to say, the answer he got was, the answer is not currently available and will be provided soon. A bit worrying when the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs can't even answer a question about the province in which the capital city of South Africa is located. So well done, George, and our team in the NCOP. That's all we've got time for this week, folks. Please do tune in next Tuesday for another exciting episode of Coronacast. Have a great weekend and stay safe, South Africa.